Hello everyone, welcome to TPS Training. Lewis Weber here with Behavior Care. In this segment we are going to be taking a look at the new IEP Writing tab for TPS. This is an exciting improvement because it facilitates the integration of the IEP with TPS, obviously, and with PBIS words that are to be used increasingly as replacement behaviors. In prior years, there was a tendency to write increasing and decreasing target behaviors that were opposites, like the decreasing target behavior of verbal aggression would be then paired with the increasing target behavior of uses socially appropriate verbal behavior. This kind of opposite thing was useful, but redundant. And the reason that it was redundant is when the students stopped being verbally aggressive, they were verbally appropriate, and vice versa. So when we looked at the TPS data, we had these opposite graphs, and they weren't as informative as they could be. Because if you knew that the student was verbally aggressive, you also knew, without having to look at anything else, that the student was not verbally appropriate. And so what we've tried to do is make the increasing and decreasing goals more independent. So then the question became, well, what are the increasing goals? What should they be? And how do we measure them? Well, over the years, we've been taking a look at something that has been around us but not being used. It's one of those right under the nose kinds of things. And these words are each school's PBIS words. Now at Oak Park, we've prototyped this over the last few years, and at Oak Park we use ROAR, respect, on task, accepting, and responsibility. Now many of your schools use the two R words, respect and responsibility, and we've used those as increasing target behaviors. But then there's been some question about what exactly are we recording? What are we observing and measuring for the replacement behaviors? It's pretty easy to talk about the decreasing targets. What's verbal aggression? What's physical aggression? Although it's not entirely easy. I mean, you still have to think about it and come up with the right words, but it's easier than with some of the more global increasing target behaviors like respect and responsibility. Well, when we define respect as behavior that aligns with the values of another person, that is the definition, the conceptual definition that we've been using for respect. And when we look at the conceptual definition of responsibility, which is goal-seeking behavior, behavior that's working towards a future outcome, those are behaviorally useful in a global sense. But then we have the issue of what exactly are we supporting in the behavior intervention plan. Although we might be supporting respect and responsibility and at Oak Park on task and acceptance as well. What exactly are those words defined as behaviorally? And that's been a gap. And that gap has been closed with this year's version of TPS. And so let's take a look at how this is going to operate. Here we have a goal, and again, this is Oak Park's words. Let me just switch over here to setup 2, and you can see it all in one picture here. We have the word respect on task, acceptance, and responsibility. Now there's also some words here that are referring to an alignment with CHAMPS, but let's not worry about that right now. Let's just look at these keywords here. And we have decreasing target behaviors, and these are pretty typical and also do need to be defined. But I want to focus here on these increasing target behaviors. So I noted that what the behavioral definition of respect, a behavior that aligns with the values of another person. Okay, and if we can agree on that for just a moment, then we say, well, what is the BIP going to support? So then we uh, need to go back to the IEP tab, which I will do in just a second here. And here are the words. So these, in the blue box here, you get to put in the specific words, specific behaviors that you're going to support as replacement behaviors in your BIP. So the IEP tab is going to allow you to operate at these two levels. You have the global level, which is right here. We see the word respect is going to be used because that's pulling, TPS is pulling this directly from your TPS configuration for a student, which in this case is Stu. Respect is the first target behavior. But when we go to write the IEP goal, we want to include some of the specific behaviors that are mentioned in the BIP. And here are some of the behaviors. So these are the specific behaviors that are going to be supported for Stu for respect. Now, you might have a student that doesn't have those capabilities, doesn't have these behaviors in the repertoire, and maybe the student is the student's level of cognitive impairment is such that a student is unable to do these things. And so then you come up with different words. For example, a student with very significant impairment might be able to only look at the teacher when the teacher walks into the room. And so then you would not have these words here. You would type those words in. And for that student, respect, which is still conceptually defined in the same way as a behavior that aligns with the values of another person, but we're going to change the level of the action to something that's more appropriate for that particular student who's severely impaired, to one that the student can accomplish. And so you can customize the way that your school's PBIS words, and every school has these words, so that you can customize these words for the level of the student, so that you can write a BIP whose purpose is to support what is this year referred to as character education. So each of your school's character education words can now be the BIP replacement behaviors and the increasing target behaviors, and you can customize those character ed words with specific behaviors that are now included automatically in the goal. So if we were to say, well, we're not going to use these last two, I just want to delete these to show you how it updates. So I'm going to delete that, hit enter, and then the goal here updates. So whatever you type here in the blue is going to be put into this goal. So just to take a look at what we've got now, using a 0 to 4 rating rubric, and this will update based on your TPS configuration. And just as an aside, we want all schools to use 0 to 3 or 0 to 4. And the primary reason, just to digress for a moment, is that 0 and 1 is not informative enough because it doesn't tell us intensity, particularly for the decreasing target behaviors. So all schools 0 to 3 or 0 to 4. I like 0 to 4 because it aligns with the grading system, and we know about 0 to 4 ways of evaluating students. But 0 to 3 and 0 to 4 are your choices. And in this TPS example, and at Oak Park, it's 0 to 4. And so then it explains it what it is. And we use the word performance now for increasing target behaviors. So medium level, high level, etc., very high level of performance, Stu Meet will increase the percentage of rating points earned for respect. There's our character ed word, our PBIS word at Oak Park, it's the first one. Observed as behaviors of, and right after that is where it puts in the blue, the text from the blue box, to greater than or equal to 66% or equivalent as recorded by teachers' observations during available recording periods. So there is your IEP goal. Now, when it comes time to write the IEP goal, inform your liaison that you will take the responsibility of providing the IEP goal for the social and emotional component, or possibly curriculum and learning. If you were to do like an on-task goal or something related to that, you can discuss which category your TPS data is going to inform in the IEP. Social and emotional goal is the most common one. The idea here, or the main point here, is that TPS goal writing, let me rephrase that, the TPS IEP goals are to be used for the IEP purposes, so that way we can have ongoing measurement of a student's performance throughout the year, and we don't have to do any other kind of measurement. There's no other thing we have to do. We just collect TPS data and we can automatically evaluate the student's performance on their IEP goal. So this is the goal text, and you can copy it by just clicking here and then right click and just click on copy. If you wanted just this first goal, you can copy all the IEP goals by clicking on this, which as you can see copies everything, and then you'll paste it as text in a Word document. So there's a couple ways to copy it and send it to your liaison. Take this responsibility off of the liaison. They have so much to be concerned about in the IEP process, and their responsibility is not to be expert on the BIP and the TPS data. That's the behavior specialist job. And so you can supply them with the IEP goal, and they'll appreciate that. I believe they will. The ones that I've worked with appreciate it because that way they know that it's going to be connected to the ongoing performance of the student with TPS data, and the wording is going to be consistent, etc. Now, where do these numbers come from? So this 66% is based on the G3. And I'm going to click over here, and we can see for each target behavior we have a rating column, and the average for the year is 55%, 63%, so forth. We're looking at respect right now. So that is 55%, the average performance for the year, and these are average of these monthly summaries, is 55%. So here's how it works. What the IEP tab does is it takes the number that's right here in the green box and it multiplies that by the percentage, which in this case was 55% for respect for the year, the average for the year. It multiplies 55 times 1.2 or 120%. That's how the math works. It's not an addition. It's not 55 plus 20. It's 55 times 1.2. I'm just letting you know how that happens so that you can adjust this and it'll be meaningful to you. So the result then is a 20% or a 120% increase on the 55%, which is now 66%. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second, more about that in a second, but I want to explain now how these intermediate values, I'm going to make this a little smaller, how these intermediate values are computed. So what TPS does, if you want to make objectives, it takes that 20% annual improvement and it allocates it into quarters. So here's the fourth quarter, here's the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter. So it divvies up that 20%, and given that 20 is divisible by 4, we have these nice increments of 5%, 10%, and 15%. Now the math goes like this. It's 105% times 55, which is 58, and it's 110% times 55, which is 61, and 115% times 55, which is 63, and then we have the annual goal, which is 120% of the current performance. Now that's our default is 20%, but maybe you wanted to go with a 25% increase, and you can put in whatever percentage you want. Now when I do that, TPS then divides it into quarters again, and they're a little bit different kind of numbers. So it's 6 and 13 and 19 and 25. And then what it does is it again multiplies the present level of 55%, in this case it would be 106% or 113%. So it does all that math for you. We tend to go with 20% because that's a reasonable improvement. And so whatever number you put in there, the percentages are going to be updated automatically, which makes it very convenient. Now, you may not need to use these objectives. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's really an IEP team decision and a liaison decision whether these objectives are needed, but they're here, and a lot of TPS is designed for that kind of use. It's here if you need it. You don't need to use everything. And so often I'm just sending this text right here to the liaison for the IEP goal. Now when we scroll down, you see here's increasing behavior number 2 and number 3 and number 4, and in each case they're different percentages because the G3 annual average present levels is different for each of these target behaviors. And you can see here, I'll make this a little bit bigger, you can see here that for responsibility, which is defined as some kind of goal-seeking behavior, the behaviors are identified here that the student is going to be supported through the BIP. So it's just a beautiful integration of all of these processes. These items are the things that, or these actions are the behaviors that the BIP supports. This goal shows how these behaviors are loaded into the global character education word of responsibility, and the measurement, of course, is ongoing. So it's a very tightly integrated package. Now, as we scroll down, we go into the decreasing target behaviors, and the pink, I guess we call that salmon colored rectangle, which is now a percentage decrease. We still have the example behaviors there, and it operates the same way by inserting those words. So now we've defined verbal aggression as uses confrontational language, curse words, hurtful language, etc., etc. And you can change those to whatever you want. And if you don't have them, then that would just be blank, and it would just close up the sentence, and you would just have verbal aggression. But it's nice to use those specific words because that comes from the BIP. Now, the way the percentage works is let's take a look at what the G3 is for the decreasing target behavior 1, which is verbal aggression. It's 42.4%. And what TPS is going to do is going to, just to show you how the math works, you don't really need to know this, but I'm going to, for completeness, tell you how it works. This is going to be multiplied, whatever number is here, it's going to be converted into 100% minus this. So it's 80%, because 80% is 20% less than 100%, which would be, to say no change. It's an 80% discount, 80% of the value, or 20% discount in a sense, is what this is referred to as. So in this case, it's 42% times 8, or 0.8, which is 34%. And then it does the same thing over here by creating these intermediate values, and you can change that percentage to whatever you want, and these intermediate values are then multiplied by the current level. In this case, it would be 95%, and then 90%, and then 85% of the current level. Now, why don't we just want the student to have 0 levels of these decreasing target behaviors? Well, we do, but we can't write that as a goal, right? Because that would be excessively optimistic that the intervention would just totally bring down these decreasing target behaviors to 0 level. Now, in some cases, when the student's performance is so low, you might want to write that. I tend to like to have a little bit of some percentages for decreasing target behaviors, because on a given day there might be an occurrence, and so I don't like to write 0 levels of that behavior. I like to use lower levels, maybe even 2% or 3% if the current levels are so low. Now, in some cases, when you look at these individual objectives, there may not be a change in them. In this case, there is, but sometimes you don't see a change between the objectives, and that's because the percentages are all very low. And I'm gonna scroll up here and show you. Let's take Sherry Cask, and I'm going to click on Sherry's name. Of course, now these are all Sherry's numbers. But when we go scroll back down, we see that in this case, the annual goal is 7%, and the objective number 1 is 8%, and so is the objective number 2. And the reason for that is when we start to use these other percentages, the rounding of those percentages ends up being the same. So it's not actually 8% in both of these, it's just rounded to 8% because this number of the annual goal at 7% is already so low, there's not enough room in the numbers for there to be a distinct difference between this percentage change and this percentage change. And you can see here the third objective is already at 7%. And so in this case, it doesn't make sense to use objectives because they're not different enough. But when we go back to Stu's data, we can see that, I'll scroll back down here, we can see that the percentages were high enough for his decreasing target behavior so that we can see a distinction. But whether you use the objectives or not, it's up to you and up to the needs of the IEP team. At least you have the annual goal in any of those cases. Now, sometimes for increasing target behavior, just to pop up there, sometimes the student's performance is so high. Let's just see if there is one in these examples. That is, okay, here's one. For Coriander, his performance is already so high that the 20% improvement is 100 or more. It stops at 100. So you can't get more than that, but mathematically it might be. Because if we were to go to G3, he's at 86.5%, and if you increase by 20%, it's actually a little bit more than 100%, but it tops out at 100%. Now in that case, you can use 100%. I tend to like to, again, give the student a little bit of leeway. I'm happy if I see a goal here that's writing automatically, or what I mean to say is that it's computed to be 100%. I like to use a goal of 95%, even if the 20% improvement is 100%. I like to put an annual goal maximum for increasing targets of 95%, which is still a really great percentage. It just gives us a little bit of leeway to say the student doesn't have to be perfect every day for every recording period. And we wouldn't be using objectives again because there's just not enough of a difference. But they are computed for you if you want. Okay, so that is the IEP writing tab for TPS. It does a lot of new cool things, and it helps us to link the PBIS character education words to your BIP, and it allows you to identify specific actions that are going to load into each character education word that you've identified at your school as your PBIS words, and these are the replacement behaviors for your student's behavior intervention plan. I hope you enjoy using this. I hope it makes your professional life easier. I know that from my work, it's just so convenient to be able to send these goals to your liaisons, and I hope your liaison appreciates you being able to provide that service to them. Okay, so let's do what I like to say is put a bookmark in that conversation, and thank you for watching this video. Once again, Lewis Weber with Behavior Care.